everybody. This is Mark Sheehan coming to you live from Sydney, and I'm pleased to be the moderator for today's webinar, which I think is extremely timely to all of us, navigating cybersecurity and tourism law in the aftermath of COVID. We have some very talented members of our team on deck today, as well as some bona fide experts in the field of both cybersecurity and tourism and travel law here as it affects us in Australia. Coming to us live from New York is the reputed expert in cybersecurity, the lawyer, Mr. Paul Ferrillo, who has been defending the rights of corporations and directors and all of our private details for quite a few decades. Paul comes to us with quite a yardarm of background and experience, but rather than toot his whistle, I'd rather have him spend our time talking about cybersecurity. And what is most important on the media's forefront right now seems to be the ability of hackers and pirates to raid our corporate data and information and extract significant ransoms. I'm really curious to hear how this is all going to go. So coming to us live from New York is Mr. Paul Ferrillo. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thank you very much, everybody, and good afternoon. I think it's bedtime here in New York City. Everybody's sleeping, including the dogs. I think the most important thing I can tell you all today is you are a target. You will be hacked. And if you haven't been hacked already, you will be hacked tomorrow. And I think those are the most important things I can tell any client or anybody listening to me about cybersecurity. No one's not at risk. Everyone's at risk. And even the country of Australia as well, too. I would note that in the last couple of weeks, your Prime Minister has been talking about a state-based actor targeting Australian organizations across a wide range of sectors, including all levels of government, industry, political organizations, education, health, essential service providers, and operators of critical infrastructure. State-based actor, I think, Mark, is code for China, if you didn't know that already.
Okay, so basically all of us in Australia are targets for this, for the attacks, but has anyone in the travel community been attacked now? And if so, can you give us a rundown where this is, your audience is primarily people who are leaders in tourism and travel. So can you target for us what's happening globally on the forefront for tourism and travel? Who's getting whacked and what sort of numbers are we talking about? All of our data is at risk. So who's being affected?
Well, if British Airways is in the travel industry, Mark, I would say travel industry is getting whacked. In the last couple of years, it's been very harrowing and perilous. I count British Airways, Cathay Pacific, Raven Air Group, which is that Alaska commuter airline that goes between the towns up in Alaska. There's been several major international hotel chains like Marriott, some smaller hotel chains like Holiday Inn, and even people in the reservation system, such as Sabre, have all been breached. The interesting part of, if you asked me 7 years ago or 8 years ago when I started in this business, all right, are people getting sued? I'd say probably not. Are people getting fined and penalized? I'd say probably not. Wrong-o today, that is not true. And everyone is getting fined and penalized and litigated and everyone's getting sued. British Airways was hit with a 183 million euro fine. I believe that is near $250 million last summer. Cathay Pacific just got fined 500 euros. after a major attack against its public websites. Imagine this if you were in America and some judge said, oh, there's a PowerPoint. I know that one. If you go to the Cathay Pacific slide, please. Yes, you will be hacked.
Yes, you are a target. There you go. It's up on the screen there now.
Yeah, that was your new Prime Minister Morrison talking about the Chinese-based attacks against Australia. You are not alone in Australia in that predicament. Next slide, please. There has been major cyber attacks across the United States, but there's been prognostication maybe by the insurance companies about what a major attack would look like against any one of these particular companies. There's been some data and things put together, and a major attack against Australia for a 4-week period could cost up to $30 billion, 30 with a B billion dollars. So let's go back. If you could jump a few slides ahead to the Cathay Pacific slide, please, with their tail wings. Next one. There you go.
Got it.
So, though I've never flown the airline, I hear it's rather nice, but it just got sued 500,000 euros after a brute force attack. What is that? That is somebody trying to stuff passwords and identification information into a website, and usually they hit pay dirt and get in. Next slide, please. Imagine this, in the United States, bad opinions, bad judge opinions, bad court opinions find their way into litigation and complaints. Imagine this if some judge said this in the United States, how badly you would get sued. This breach, Stephen Eckersley, the UK Information Commissioner's Office Director of Investigation, said this breach was particularly concerning given the number of basic security inadequacies across Cathay Pacific system, which easily gave easy access to hackers. The multiple serious deficiencies we found fell well below the standard expected. Imagine that, Mark, if some judge said that in the United States, that would be a very, very expensive lawsuit.
It's pretty severe, but it's pointing out some of the frailties in our corporate system, but we have no control over that, Paul. We as consumers in the tourism and travel industry, as well as outside of those parameters, we are subjecting our private data onto much more substantial sites and giving our hoteliers booking engines, etc., without no real security of where they're going. And who are the bad guys? I mean, I read last week something about $5 million being paid in ransom. What is this all about?
Well, go to the next slide, please, on TravelX. Nope, the other way. One more. There you go.
Okay.
So there are criminal gangs that we run into quite frequently when I'm investigating attacks. Criminal gangs are usually from Eastern Europe, Ukraine and Lithuania and the likes. There are also criminal gangs in other places and in other nation states as well too, like Russia and China, who act sometimes on behalf of the government. What they do is before a cyber attack, they'll send you a spoofed email, Mark, from Facebook, and the Facebook will say, "Here, Mark, here's a special offer. If you click on this, you'll get a TV." And of course, Mark Sheehan will click on the link because it's Facebook, and he'll enter his personal information in. All of a sudden, the attackers get a toehold into your network. All of a sudden, the attackers plant their malware and plant the seeds of the ransomware attack. And then 2 weeks later, you find out that the site that you want to deal with, like TravelX, for instance, is completely locked up with something called ransomware, which locks up all your files, and you can't get to them unless you pay the ransom. This has happened in a number of big cases of mine. I had a case with an aircraft manufacturer that manufactures wings for fighter jets. They woke up one morning on a Thursday with 9 major manufacturing facilities around the country, all frozen completely. They couldn't make anything. They couldn't make wings. They were dealing with the major prime contractors here in the United States. And, you know, it was very, very expensive to clean that attack up. That all started from one bad email that somebody clicked on the link. So that happened to TravelX over Christmas. That bollocksed up a lot of travelers who depend upon TravelX for changing currency in airlines. If you go to the next slide, please. Ransomware has hit airports. Albany County Airport is upstate New York, as you might know, Uncle Mark. And that got hit with a ransomware attack on January 9th, which shut down the operations of the airport for 2 hours until they paid a ransom. Note that in the Albany Airport attack, it said under 6 figures was the ransom. That doesn't exist anymore. That is very cheap. When I started settling ransomware cases, I could settle them for 5 or 10 Bitcoin, call it $100,000 or $150,000. The cases that I've been 5 million, 10 million. There's been, in the United States, there's been ransomware attacks approaching $20 million. And when you don't have backup tapes, it's a big problem and you can't pay. But not just airlines.
What happens, I'm sorry, Paul. What happens if we can't pay? Let's say, for example, I mean, is everybody bellying up and paying? And what happens for the guys that don't or who can't?
Well,
I mean,
if you're being advised by me, you have backup tapes. And even though you get a ransomware attack, it's okay because you just delete what's on your network, reboot back up, and you're online in a day or so. That's the easy way to do it. It's cheap to have backup tapes. It's not expensive, and it's easy to do that. If you don't have backup tapes, you are, as they say in the United States, you are SOL. You have to rebuild your networks, rebuild your data. Perhaps you're using data from a month or 2 before. It is not pretty, and your customers won't like it. So it's a big problem.
Well, so, then the attackers all have our private data and information as well, right?
Yes, they do, because we're very good at posting our private information on the internet, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Google, on all the other sites that we use daily in order to look at data, to speak with family. I use all these sites for business and marketing efforts. Everyone has private data on their own. So if we can go to the Intercontinental Hotel Suite slide, it's 1 or 2
Next
down.
One down.
Oh. Nope. Up. Slide 12. There you go. There's no better ubiquitous hotel chain in the United States than Holiday Inn. Holiday Inn is part of the International Hotel Group chain, or IHG. There was a big attack against IHG. Again, what attackers do is there's a public-facing website. They change the information in the public-facing website. So when you enter your credit card, they got a copy. The bad guys get a copy of your credit card as well too, and that happens very, very frequently. That happened to British Airways, who, as you saw, had to pay a $250 million fine. None of your information is safe. You have to be very, very careful when you're putting information into these sites. And what I think is most important for people to understand is you can be big, you can be small, you can be a 5 or 10 person law firm, and you could get hacked and lose millions and millions of pieces of personal information. Everyone's at risk, no one's immune. So you have hotel chains that have gotten sued. And if you can go to Sabre, which is 2 more down, SABRE, one more.
This is our booking engines. There you go, yeah?
This is your booking engine site. Sabre also has gotten sued, has gotten hacked, and therefore gotten sued as well too. So whatever site you're on, whether a hotel site, an airline site, a booking site, if you're a travel agent going on to Sabre, you could inadvertently catch malware from Sabre. It's quite bad out there. So I think, Mark, what you would probably ask me is, why is this happening?
Yeah, go on. What is the ransomware and what do we do about it? More importantly, we'd like to give our listeners an opportunity to see some blue sky. Where's the blue sky?
No, I'm the cloudy skies. My nickname is Dark Cloud. You have a couple of problems here. Data is very important for nation state attacks. Look at China with Marriott Hotels. Look at China with Anthem Healthcare. Look at China with Office of Professional Management here in the United States. Data is very expensive. The more data, the better. You can use it, you can sell it, you can buy it. Data today is the gasoline for the economic engine of our country, at least. Which is, a significant part of our GDP. You have ransomware groups that are making more and more money every day. There was a figure that the FBI published a few days ago. The total amount of ransomware that was paid in 2019 was $8 billion. $8 billion. So
that was paid to people for pirating our information, our data corporately?
Yes, $8 billion. Imagine that going to, for clean water. Imagine that for food for the underprivileged. That's a lot of money. You have underinvestment in cybersecurity, meaning, it's great you have your computer working from, that you got as a gift on 2012, but it's likely running Windows 7. Windows 7 was put out in 2009, and it's 2020. So using old architecture, using old software is a bad idea. Many companies have poor policies and procedures around risk assessments and risk mitigation. We don't patch our systems and update our systems when we're supposed to. When you get those flashes across your computer, it's time for an update, and it says you want to do it now, or do you want to wait? Wait some time to do it. Mm-hmm. What do? We always click the "let's wait some time to do it" button, and when we're waiting, we're putting off patches that should be made. You have a lot of broken websites. So let's go to the next slide, please. How and why is this happening? You have a lot of broken websites. That was Equifax. That was British Airways. On the ransomware attack, you don't have backup tapes. And as they say in the United States, and the hits keep on playing. So let's go to the last slide, please. What can you do about it? Have basics, policies, and procedures. Update your equipment and architecture. Windows 7 was released in 2009. Hackers are hacking in 2020. That's if there's a huge window dressing there about why we're in this mess we are in, it's because we're using old stuff, and that's bad. You have to patch your systems. You have to back it up. You have to look at your public websites. We're having tremendous problems. All of the Five Eyes right now are having tremendous problems with 5G, which is the new telecommunications mode or method. The problem is we're getting our supplies from China, and that may not be a good thing. I always recommend, and here's my final piece of advice to any business, any agent that's on the line, don't think you're too small to be hacked. And since you're going to get hacked, you should buy cybersecurity insurance from a reputable insurance carrier, because that can offset the great costs that that can happen when you're trying to clean up a mess. I have spent literally on cases $500,000 a week trying to clean up a cybersecurity mess. So if you have cybersecurity insurance, you know, again, you can buy these in $1 million, $2 million, $3 million policies. But if you're a small business and you're out of business for a week or two, you could be permanently out of business. So please think about buying cybersecurity insurance. So
Paul,
that's all.
Yeah. Well, just one question on that. Should any of us get attacked and be pitched for a ransom, is there Interpol, or who's the international agency? Who's policing this? Where do we go? Where do we find the help to navigate through this? It's the bad guys seem to be in a pretty good posture for winning. And what's your suggestion on recourse? What can we do to? There must be a security blanket of. There must be a group other than buying cybersecurity insurance, which is going to cover us in the event we get the flu or corona or whatever you want to call. But who do we call? Is there Batman and Robin out there, or Interpol, or how do we deal with it?
Well, it's a particular problem because remember, the internet is worldwide. It's all over the place. There's not one particular body of police force or everything that, you know, can respond to attacks. In the United States, we're very lucky because we have a number of organizations like Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and the Secret Service that all handle these and all can be called. Australia has its own Australia CERT or organization that you can call, but likely they're not going to, the problem is they're too busy. They have too many of these cases and they have not enough assets and not enough resources. So the best thing you can do, Mark, is do it yourself. Practice the basics, have your policies and procedures, back up your systems, you know, patch your networks when you need to, look for vulnerabilities, and buy cybersecurity insurance. That's the best advice I can give you because, you know, unless you're dealing with a criminal chain or unless you're dealing with Russia or China, our Federal Bureau of Investigations and our Homeland Security are too busy for the little guys. They've got big things going on. So that's the answer to your question, Mark. There's not a lot of help for the average Joe who gets hit with a ransomware attack.
Well, like in real estate, it's location, location, location. But what I've heard you say repeatedly today, Paul, is back up, back up, back up, and be fully up to date on your defenseware.
Yes,
And oh,
sir.
by the way, get cybersecurity insurance while you're at it. But is that pretty much?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, if you're in the United States, I would say call Paul. No, but you're not there. But I pretty much give the same advice to everybody. Your best defense is your own defense. And the problem we see in the cybersecurity ecosystem is not a lot of people put up a defense. And that's where you get all these cybersecurity attacks, and you get people going out of business because of ransomware attacks. And we can't have that. Jobs are scarce enough as it is. We can't have businesses going belly up because they're not practicing good cybersecurity.
Right, fabulous. I don't know whether we have the facility, Paul, to take any questions online now, but I would encourage all of our participants to come into eGlobal after this, eGlobal Travel News, and provide some feedback on your participation today. And if they have any questions, we would love to field them. And at some stage, Paul, we would very much like to have you back. We'll buy the pajamas this time, and we'll try to do it a little earlier in the day. But we can't thank you enough for coming along and contributing to what we hope will be a series of sort of provocative webinars on subjects just like this. Thanks for being the lead in the wagon train of information.
Well, let me just give you, this happens a lot with questions, but my email address is pferrillo, P as in Paul, Ferrillo, FERRILLO @AOL.com. And if anyone has questions, Mark, they can always email me as well, too, if they can't go through Stephen or others.
Okay. Also, viewers, while you're out there, at the bottom of your screen or the top of your screen, you have an item which is called chat. It's got a little box there. If you wanted to file in quickly a question, you could do that. Also on your screen right now is Paul's details, and we'll be happy to share them again at the end of this. We'll share Paul's bio, sketch, and background information on this. And Paul, can we use your presentation again? Can we store that in our archives? People who might not have been able to be with us today, can we hold that in our archives for people to view later, or can they go onto a website and find this?
No, I would say please store it on your website. Feel free to send it around. It's in the public domain right now, so therefore it's yours, not mine. So please feel free.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Sleep well, and thanks again.
Okay,
We'll
thank you, sir. All right, take care. Thank
Mr.
you,
Paul
Doc.
Ferrillo, thank you very much for leading us through cybersecurity. And thanks, Paul. Good evening.
Good night, sir.
Okay. Now our talent on the program for today is Tony Cordato, who is an extremely well respected attorney here Australia-wide, who has a true passion for tourism and travel related subjects and items. And he's got a long yardarm of testimonials and credentials to back that comment up. Welcome to the program, Tony. Are you okay for us to call you Tony or Anthony more formal? Which would you prefer?
You qualify for being mate status, Mark, so you can call me Tony.
Okay, Tony. I think we also have a PowerPoint presentation. It's said, I've heard you're a handsome man, but we don't have the opportunity to see your face to screen here. However, I think Stephen does have your PowerPoint presentation, which we can put up there on the screen now. And if you'll just please walk through with your presentation today. And again, I'd encourage participants from whatever desk you're at the moment. If you could, if you have questions for Tony, click on either the bottom or the top of the screen where it says chat, and fire questions in for him, and we'll take it from there. So without any further delay on my part, Tony Cordato talking to us about travel cancellations, refunds, and what's changed for us in tourism and travel after Corona's invasion. Take it away, Tony.
Thanks, Mark. Oh, I was just musing about what the major concerns were in the travel industry 6 months ago. And they were things like getting the connections right. They were making sure the travel, the cruise, matched what the brochure said, what was on the website, and things like visas and passports. Well, things have changed since COVID-19. We don't worry about visas and passports because you can't get out of the country. We're not worried so much about what the brochure's promised and what's happening, because we won't be able to do any travel till next year to find out. What we are worried about, and what came about very quickly in February, March this year, was cancellations and refunds and rebookings and credits. So all of a sudden, everyone in the travel industry thought, hang on, this person's asking us for a refund because we can't, our tour, our flight, our cruise can't go ahead anymore. What do we do? And of course, the answer was, you go to that bit in your website, your brochure, headed Terms and Conditions. And somewhere in there, there'll be a clause about cancellations. And they were the normal clauses. The clause which said, if we cancel because we can't provide the tour, the cruise, or the flight, we'll refund the money. And then there was the other clause which said, if you, the consumer, the customer, don't want to go on the tour, well, depending on how much notice you give, depending on what fare you booked, you might get some of your fare back, you might get none of it back. But nobody thought about the third alternative. What if it's not the fault of the supplier, not the fault of the consumer? What if it's something out there, something else that's causing the cancellation of the tour, the flight, the cruise? Well,
Tony, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Tony, before we go much farther, could you tell us, I'm just curious, so we can set the stage for our listeners, who do you act on behalf of? Are you acting on behalf of the travel industry, the traveler? I'm just trying to get a perspective.
I work for the travel industry. Yeah, okay. Mainly tour operators. There's a cruise line I did conditions for, hotels and resorts, and some travel agents, but it's tour operators, and that's where the terms and conditions become very important.
I just wanted to clarify for our listeners.
So we have if we can go to the next slide, Stephen. Can we go to slide 2, Stephen?
Stephen, slide 2. There we have. Thank you.
Okay. What happened was we had tours, flights, cruises being cancelled for something outside of the control of anyone. There were two things that happened outside of the control of anyone. And number one was, of course, the virus, coronavirus, which made travel unsafe. So travel couldn't proceed, even if you're allowed to travel, because most forms of transport, most suppliers simply closed down what they were doing because they didn't wish to risk lawsuits, class actions for negligence for having spread coronavirus amongst the travellers. And the second thing that happened was the borders were closed. Now, this is a very unusual event to close borders worldwide. But on the 18th of March this year, the Australian government posted "Do not travel" on its travel advisory and effectively closed the borders. So you couldn't travel even if you wanted to travel. You couldn't travel even if the supplier had the crews available. You couldn't travel. So this is generally known in legal speak as force majeure. A force majeure event. Something's just come out of the sky, or insurance terms, it's called an act of God. So what we're dealing today is these force majeure events. And how does an event, being it coronavirus or border closures, affect the...
There used to be some protections, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Tony, there used to be some protections offered to us by things like the Geneva Convention. Are we talking now about travel refunds or travel credits? And
we're talking all of them. I just want to set the scene to say it's something outside everyone's control, which wasn't really well covered in the terms and conditions. So they've had to make it up as they go along. The refund, travel credit policies and rebooking policies have been made up for most purposes by the industry as it went along. The consumer regulator has come up with rules now after the event. The travel insurance cover, which everyone thought might cover cancellations, has proved to be useless. And the travel agent is the piggy in the middle. They've got real issues in that they're wearing all the cost and getting none of the benefit. So let's start with the airlines. Stephen, can we get
that's the next slide for us? Thank you.
Airlines.
Just as a sidebar, do you think, a quick question for you, Tony, before we get stuck into this one? Do you think the airlines are being optimistic about their next resumed international fly dates? Or
Yeah,
you don't have to answer officially, but there's a lot of speculation out there while we're on the subject of airlines. Any thoughts?
Well, the Qantas website says no flights until after October 2020. Most international airlines are either using a date similar to that or even later. I mean, if you heard what the Prime Minister said within the last 2 weeks, there'll be no international flights till the end of the year. So yeah, we can basically write off 2020 for international flights.
So you're right along with us. There's no crystal ball. Okay, carry on. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
So the problem is, if you have a passenger that's booked a flight, at least before 31 October as we speak, or maybe 31 December as we speak, depending on your airline, what do? You can't make the flight if you're the airline. So you'll offer to rebook on a flight next year sometime at no additional cost. You'll offer a flight credit. And somewhere a little bit further down, you might say, we'll offer you a refund and we won't charge you any cancellation or change fees. So, I mean, it makes commercial sense to rebook, to offer rebooking or flight credits, because the money stays with you, the supplier. The consumer, however, may just want a refund. Now, they're entitled to a full refund if their flight is cancelled, full stop. If they're chosen a flight next year, for example, and the consumer chooses to cancel, well, they may find they don't get much of the fare back, depending on what kind of fare they've booked. They won't get much fare back because cancellation fees will apply. some airlines like Emirates have just said, because of the COVID-19 situation, while it continues, we'll just give you a refund or a voucher and won't charge any fee for it. So airlines have come on board the refund train. Currently, they're taking about 12 weeks to process a refund, but they will give a full refund. I've had that experience this year, and Singapore Airlines, after 12 weeks, credited the full amount of the fare. So I was happy. Well, I'm not happy not going, but I was happy to get the refund. But next slide.
Just very quickly on that, Tony, is there a statute of limitations? If I have a flight for Hawaiian Airlines, for example, and I don't do anything about either rebooking it or getting a refund, is there at some point in time where the airline can say they just absorb that into is there protection under a statute of limitations or something, or we're dealing with a whole new tape measure?
It's not really a statute of limitations. Most airlines will only accept bookings up to 12 months in advance. So as long as you cancel before the flight, then you should get something back. So if you cancel, the Qantas before 31 October, you get a full refund. If your flight is after that and you cancel today, you'll get only some refund. It'll be a fare less the cancellation charges. So advice would be, if you've got a trip booked for December, just sit on your hands and wait for Qantas to cancel the flight, because you'll get the full refund.
Okay, thank you. Tour operators, here we go.
Tour operators, different position from airlines, because they've often spent a fair bit of money. They've spent a fair bit of money planning the tour. They've spent a fair bit of money perhaps putting deposits for their various suppliers, the accommodation, the local tour guide and so on. So they're not really in a position of holding the money to be able to refund it like the airlines are. So they are more into putting in a suspension period. So we've suspended our trips until Kontiki until 30 November this year, Top Deck until 30 September this year, Trafalgar until 30 November this year. So we've just suspended. If you happen to be booked on a suspended trip in that period, then we will rebook you. That's the offer. We'll rebook you and maybe give you a credit if you want to change trips, but we'll rebook you. They don't willingly offer refunds. And if they did, depending on their conditions, they may be able to deduct, they should be able to deduct some of the expenses they've incurred in putting the trip together.
Well, tour operators normally buy forward for their accommodation and coach leasing and, all of those sorts of things. So they're out of pocket. It'd be rather difficult for them. They'd have to go back to umpteen hotel providers and accommodation and attraction providers, because they buy in bulk, and they buy in advance for at least a portion of their every booking. So they've already, the chickens have already left the coop in many regards in terms of refunds. So I guess it's up to the travel agent or the consumer to go back to their particular tour operator and find out what policy each one has. They're like snowflakes, no two are ever going to be alike, right?
That's correct. Okay, can we go into cruise lines?
The next, Stephen, could we move to the next slide? Thank you.
Cruise lines are interesting. They have they call it a pause period. So a lot of them have paused cruises until end of the year or 29th of October or whatever. So we pause. So if you're part of a paused cruise, as you see in the bottom part of the screen, they have two options. Option one is the future cruise credit, but they're really smart. They don't just say, we'll just book you again on a cruise sometime before December 2022, right. A long time. They say, well, we'll give you an onboard credit. So there's a bit of a carrot, and smart marketing. They give people a carrot to book a future cruise. Or you can just have 100% refund. So I kind of like the cruise ship approaches, and of course that's Royal Caribbean and Carnival Cruise Line, who've got about 70% of the cruise market. They're both pretty much into this idea of giving an onboard credit in addition to the cruise again. But if you don't want that, they'll give you a refund. They're very commercial people. Okay.
Either way, it seems pretty amenable to the cruise lines trying desperately to hold on to the booking, which I think is. And let me just say, while we're on cruise lines, the next webinar we have coming up is going to be hosted by John Alwyn Jones, and that takes place with us through eGlobal Travel News on the 27th of August. I'll mention that more later, but we're going to delve in with great depth. We got a baker's dozen of the top talent in the cruise industry coming on board for that webinar, and we've already got hundreds lined up to participate. So if you're at all interested in pursuing the cruise lines and our future with COVID, please plan to participate. I'm sorry, keep going, Tony. Didn't mean to interrupt. I'm a Yankee, I do that.
That's okay, Stephen. The next slide. Of course, in Australia, we have a consumer regulator called the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, which we call the ACCC, because it's too big a name. They finally sparked into life on the 18th of March this year and decided we should give some guidance to the travel industry. Well, the guidance has been where there's sufficient complaints, we're going to force the supplier or the travel agent to refund. So in May, they forced Flight Centre to refund the fees Flight Centre were charging to process refunds. Now, Flight Centre were charging $300 per person for international flight cancellations and $50 for domestic flight cancellations. And if you think about it, those fees were a little bit excessive. For a $300 international cancellation on an $800 return fare to Bali was a little bit high. My view is, had Flight Centre been a bit more reasonable and just charged their commission rate, which maybe was 5% instead, which would have made it $35 or $40, ACCC may not have been interested. But as it was, ACCC says, no, you must refund everything. You cannot charge people for processing cancellations.
Okay. Tony,
yeah.
In the interest of watching our timing, do we have your permission to post this PowerPoint presentation after the event? I'm sure there are people who would want to go back and review it, and we'd love to have it on site for those who couldn't participate today. But in the interest of timing, I need to move on. Could we jump to the next one?
No, I've got 5 minutes. I'll do it in 5 minutes for you.
Okay.
The Qantas issue was they were emphasising like credits and rebookings and not emphasising refunds. And the ACCC said, no, you have to simply emphasise refunds. And same with Etihad. They were emphasising credits and rebookings, and the ACCC said, no, even if the consumer has accepted a flight credit, you've got to advise them they can have a refund. Next slide, thanks. Legal action. All I'm going to say is you can't go near any of the consumer tribunals because they won't deal with cases involving overseas travel. So if you want to sue, you've got to go to a court. Next slide, thanks.
Wow. Is that because they're just so jammed up, there's no recourse?
No, they've got this rule that it's the state bodies, and we can only deal with state laws. International travel is federal, and there's no federal tribunal, so you're in nowhere land except going to the court system. Travel insurance, all I want to say there is it's a waste of time if you think you're going to get cancellation cover for not being able to travel due to COVID, due to border closures. I mean, it's just simply a waste of time. But let's get on with travel.
That's painful because we often spend tens and thousands of dollars making sure we're well covered, security blanket with our travel cover. And you're basically saying travel insurance is missing in action. They're just out to lunch.
Completely. Since the 23rd of January, in fact, it's been missing in action because that was when COVID-19 hit the news. And they said, well, it's now public. We exclude pandemics. There's no cover.
Okay.
Travel agent. Last slide. Stephen?
Stephen, last one. There we go. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Travel agents have the unenviable task of processing travel cancellations.
They get the short end of the stick, it looks like to me. Everybody else, the travel agents, gets the shaft.
Yeah. But travel agents, really, they're okay if they rebook or obtain travel credits, even though they can't charge for it. They're okay if they do it because the commission is still intact. But if the consumer wants a refund, to cancel and get a refund, there's a commission recall. A full commission recall. So I've just given you this table of commission recalls which my local travel agent gave me. So they said, well, the minute we ask for a refund, our account is debited with the commission recall. So we lose our commission, and our account is also debited for a processing fee. For an airline, it's $22 if they're not an IATA accredited agent. So they're actually paying for the privilege of obtaining refunds.
Wow.
I said to my travel agent, look, just give me your account number and I'll give you your commission and the ticketing fee you've been charged because you've earned it. It's not your fault that the travel was cancelled. In fact, it's nobody's fault, but you've done the work. I'm happy to pay, but their bureaucracy at the moment hasn't come back to me on that. So my suggestion is that travel agents should have a condition or a notice on the bottom of their itinerary, and the notice being that if there is a cancellation and you're processing a refund, to be able to at least charge either the commission rate or a flat fee, a small fee to process the refund. And I think that, well, nobody saw this coming, but my advice would be to all travel agents to put a note that you'll be charging $30 or $50. A flat fee is probably easier than saying we'll be charging the commission we've earned to process a refund. And I think that would be acceptable to the ACCC, and it's certainly a fee for service.
Well, also the travel agent has the obligation and the intent to retain a valued customer, so they're going to try and do whatever they can. But it just seems they're definitely the odd guy out in this equation. No matter how you cut up Corona, they're sitting right out there on the skinny end.
Oh, yeah. very definitely. And they've got to make some money from somewhere, and they're not.
All right. Do you want to, Tony, would you put the ribbons on today's talk for us from your point of view? Just, you know, is there, I don't know whether Stephen has this available to screen, but we'd like to be able to have your PowerPoint. And also, are you okay with people from our constituency reaching out to you for more information and consultation? If we have a screenshot of your corporate details in Sydney, we'd love to share them with our audience, both now and after the event. But I want to reach out to say thank you very much for participating today.
Of course, yes, the title page has got some. You're very welcome to have the presentation online.
Thank you.
It's in the public domain, and it's 100% accurate. You're very welcome to have it. I don't charge for short emails or short consultations, being defined as something up to 10 minutes, because I'm actually happy to hear what people's experiences are. So an email with a short answer, a phone conversation, they're fine. I'm happy. If it goes further, well, it's a different story.
Okay. Well, again, on behalf of all of us, Tony, thank you very much for participating today. We'd love to have you back, and we have an ongoing series of events, which I'm sure we'd be delighted to have you on board for. Thanks again for your time and your enthusiasm.
Sorry,
and on behalf of
E
Global Travel, for all of you, I'd like to say everyone who joined us today, we've loved having you, and keep your eyes peeled. We've got some really good things coming up. And before I say goodbye, I wanted to remind you that the famous John Alwyn Jones is going to be our master of ceremonies for what the future of cruising might be, and what it might look like. And that webinar is taking place on the 27th of August. So if you haven't signed up already, and there are hundreds who have, we would love to have you on board, literally, figuratively on board for that presentation. It'll be very provocative. We've got a baker's dozen of the best talent in the tourism industry in cruising that will be there on deck. And if you have anything to do, breathe any air at all that has to do with cruising, you need to be there. On behalf
does anybody have any questions for Tony? Just if anybody does, you can just unmute your screen and just ask Tony straight away online now.
We also have a forum for this, Stephen. Afterwards, people can write to us at the eGlobal Travel News, and we're happy to field whatever those are publicly as well. So again, on behalf of everybody, we've loved you, and do give us some feedback. Future webinars, if you have thoughts on other subjects we might want to undertake, any challenges we might want to give a shot to, just give us a notice, heads up. Again, thank you all for coming along. Good day, good night, good morning, I don't know. Signing off is Mark Sheehan for eGlobal Travel News.